chat.
Welcome to Honey We Need to Chat, the podcast all about communication in a relationship. My name is Blair. This is my wife, Amy.
Hello.
And we believe that when communication dies, bad things happen.
Yes, we do. If you've been following along, you will have seen that we're doing a series on mental load, and we've done a couple episodes that have kind of touched on different parts of the mental load topic. And this week, we're talking on something that's not specifically to mental load, but really just conversations across the board. We're going to be exploring what happens when you have received feedback, criticism, comments, engagement from your partner that feels sarcastic, critical, negative, blunt, whatever it might be, difficult conversations not given in a nice way. So we wanted to explore, as the receiver of those conversations, how you can navigate this to keep moving the relationship forward and keep making it constructive in terms of building and strengthening your relationship, because these things can really, really impact how we continue to explore what's going on for each other. So this episode, we're going to be exploring a little bit about how the receiver of these kinds of conversations can navigate it in a constructive way. We're going to look at why we might be missing each other, why we might be so triggered by these kinds of comments. We're also going to look at real examples of bad delivery and how that might be playing out, tools to help you understand what might be going on in that moment, and a number of other things. It's not just for the person that receives these kind of comments. It's actually probably helpful for people that struggle with expressing what they want to express clearly too. So stick around. We're going to dive into this a little bit more.
Our minds are quite full today, so we're going to break it up. We're going to do a would you rather question. This is going to help us, and just it's going to be fun for you. So I've got a question for you. Would you rather accidentally sending your partner a screenshot of their worst outfit ever with the caption, "Look what they thought was okay," or accidentally reply, "Haha, yep," to their long, heartfelt message about their feelings?
I would rather accidentally reply, haha, yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah, easily.
No way.
Accidentally, because then I'll be like, oh, sorry, so sorry. I sent that to the wrong person.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What would you would rather send?
I think I would rather do the other one.
You would
because,
send a screenshot of me and say, look what they thought was okay.
I would rather send a screenshot of you.
I would be so much more offended if you did that than if you said, haha, yep.
Yeah.
I'm used to your thumb replies.
Maybe if I remove the accidentally. But they're both accidentally.
But one is an actual thing you're saying about someone.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if I should say this. I've become such a boomer with the thumbs up button on Messenger.
Yeah.
I do it all the time accidentally now. And I used to get so frustrated at my parents because they would accidentally send the thumbs up to things.
Yeah.
And I do it all the time. And I don't even notice until I come back and I'm like so passive aggressive.
Yeah.
You don't really care because you would just do it all the time.
I'm a boomer on social media anyway. I just have no idea what I'm doing.
Anyway, because it looks really rude, in one of my chats, we changed it to a less friendly icon. And I accidentally I was having a conversation with these people. They were talking about how someone didn't get something that they wanted, a position that they wanted. I accidentally
like
just
a work
sent
position.
it. Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
I accidentally just sent this icon, not noticing, didn't respond. Like 20 minutes later, I came back and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not mean to just send that in response to you saying that you didn't get the thing you wanted.
Emojis.
Emojis.
That's fun.
Yeah, so I would much rather say ha ha ha.
I'm conflicted now.
And then write back
I'm
and be like, oh
now.
my gosh, sorry, I meant to send that to my mom. Anyway, so welcome to Honey We Need to Chat. We're going to be talking about this. And the reason we want to talk about this topic of navigating conversations when you're not receiving it in a great way is life isn't perfect. It's not perfectly sculptured. And we talk on this podcast all the time about communication in ideal ways. The stuff that we talk about is like textbook looks ideal on paper, but we also recognize, and we try to bring this into the episodes, that while it looks ideal, we're all flawed humans that have emotions and reactions and stresses and distractions and all these things that come into when we communicate. And any of those things combined can mean that how we say something will come across in a way that we don't intend it to be. And, or we will intend it to be that way, but we're just not in a good headspace. And really, if we were in a good headspace, we wouldn't choose to communicate it that way. So this episode is to try and help with that a little bit. I want to clarify before we dive in that this is not excusing abusive behaviors at all. This is not excusing a pattern of disrespect and abuse. And if that is what you've experienced, then we really recommend seeking professional help and from people that you trust and love, because that's a totally different topic. And today we're talking to people that are trying to communicate well as a team, but they just keep missing the mark. There's something that they miss the mark, and then that spirals them. So just to clarify that, we are not trying to downplay anyone's experience with actual abuse and disrespectful treatment. That's not okay and not excusable. And I also want to say, we're going to talk a lot about how you as the receiver of these conversations can navigate it in a constructive way, but it's also not your ownership of it. So your ownership is over your reactions and how you interact with the people around you and your actions in the world. But your ownership is not over somebody else's actions to excuse their ownership of it. It's not to try and make you carry that for them. This is just because when you're in a relationship, our goal is to work together as a team towards strengthening that relationship. And and that is not 50-50 or 100% all the time. It's not equal and perfect, just like communication isn't. So sometimes we need to have an extra level of grace for our partners in order to keep the relationship moving forward, so that they can grow and so that we can grow.
And before we dive into this, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. This tells us a lot about you joining us on this episode. It tells us that you are intentional in your own growth and development and in your relationship as well. And that's super encouraging because that's what we want to do. We want to journey with you. As we grow, we want to grow with you. So that's super exciting. So thank you so much for joining us there. If you do get something out of this episode, please like, share, subscribe. That goes a huge way for us. If you want to support us in any way, support us that way. That would be fantastic. Write a comment. Any of those things would be absolutely appreciated. So please get onto that. Just take 2 minutes now. It won't take long at all, but get onto that and help us out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So as I said, we've been doing a series on mental load, and there's a few episodes there to reflect back, to make sure you've listened to in terms of helping you communicate about mental load. This episode is about navigating tough conversations, regardless of the topic, whether it's mental load or something else, but it's a helpful tool in terms of helping you strengthen your relationship and push through these things. So the reason we're talking about this is these patterns can get us really stuck. If you find yourself in a pattern where the way things are communicated is not working or constructive, you can find yourself really wedged into a stuck place in your relationship because I'm kind of laughing because this happens all the time and it's from me. But we are so focused on how someone's saying something and how that then impacts us that it becomes multi-layered issues. It's not just the thing that has been raised. It then becomes about how they said it. It then becomes about how you take things. It then becomes about the patterns that happen in the conversations or the avoidance of things because of how it pans out when you have these conversations, and it just becomes this really layered issue. So that's why if you have a little circuit breaker in there that helps you push past what the clumsiness might be at the beginning, it might help you keep things moving. And we had this conversation when we had Sam and Liv on the podcast a few episodes back. They were talking about how they've had to put a rule in place that she will just let Sam get out what he's trying to get out, because he'll struggle to word it properly first. Yep. And she has accepted that she's going to give him extra grace for those first little parts where he's sharing until he can kind of get to the point of what he's trying to share, rather than holding that against him.
Yeah, and I could actually really relate to that. So even with you and even with my boss, actually, like there's that point where you identify that together, but there's a point where you can't expect the other person to just know that, if that makes sense.
To know what? Sorry.
You need that space to reflect and get to that point. Yeah. For you and my boss, I'll start talking. I'm like, all right, look, I'm just trying to get this out. Like I know this is going to be blunt. I know it's going to be, I'm just trying to process it first so that we can get to what we need to discuss. And that's really helpful. So I need to take actual ownership of that too. Like, it's not always for you to now be like, I need to give Blair this space. It's like, I need to help you give me that space. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah. So it's a two-way thing there too.
Yeah. And it's not so that ongoing you're able to just say whatever you want to say without thinking about how it's said. It's so that we can continue to strengthen that muscle, because you learn things through exercise.
Because that's the other thing too, is I could use that space and just unleash my processing in a very rude way. And that's not constructive. It still needs to be constructive. But yeah, again, just voicing it in a constructive way is still better than trying to do it in my head.
Getting it out so that then you can work through it helps the next time not be quite the same way. Yeah. And that's kind of the aim. This is so that you can keep moving forward, not so you can find a different loop to be stuck in, which is one person just letting the other person say whatever they want and then being like, oh, I can't really bring it up because I'm letting them say what they want. Yeah. That's another loop. That's the same issue in a different way. This is to get through that, to try and move to the next part, to try and move to the next part. And then that's how we strengthen in a relationship in every way. Like you workshop these things. It's back and forth. It's clumsy and it's awkward. But you do that so that you can become stronger, because nothing is strong just automatically off the top. And the people communicate differently. So you might find you're in a relationship with someone who really communicates similarly to you. Great. So this might not be such an issue if you're on the same page. If you're like us and we have very different ways of communicating and very different values around communication and words and that sort of thing, then it might be a bit more clumsy initially. And you might need this exercise or lean into this exercise a little bit more than you would otherwise. So just because you're finding yourselves in these communication loops does not mean that love is gone. And it doesn't mean that your relationship is doomed or anything like that. It is a really claustrophobic feeling to feel like you cannot bring things up with your partner, or to feel like you can't move through a conversation. It's not even you can't navigate the problem. You can't move through the conversation to navigate the problem or to express what's going on with you. It's a really claustrophobic feeling. And that's how we see healing. And that's how we see strengthening in relationships, is having those conversations. So if you've had this pattern where you can't seem to like get past the conversation to get to the point of it, it can feel like you're just floating on top of this ocean, I guess, and not able to actually work on what's going on, which ideally will bring you through to not having these conversations. So it's almost like a roadblock that comes up. So it doesn't mean that your love is gone or your relationship is doomed. It actually could just mean that your communication lines are crossed, and that it might just take an extra level of understanding on one side or both sides to just push through awkwardly until you can get through that communication blunder. So there's a few reasons why we might be missing each other in these conversations, why the way that things are delivered could be really not hitting the mark. So sometimes your partner might say something that comes across a bit harsh, but what if that's not the full story? What if how they've said it is not the full story? A lot of the times we might react to the tone before we really even understand what their intention was, or we take the words that they're saying at face value instead of understanding the meaning that's sitting behind them. You can think about examples of this, like the words you use to describe things can be just subtle little differences and hold such different meanings. But when your brain is like stressed, it's really hard to think of the right words. I find it hard when I'm sitting in this chair doing an episode. So especially if you're stressed and you're in an argument or a conversation.
This episode is so relevant to me. I mentioned this before, but it's so critical. So with my family growing up, in conflict, it was either like really, really blunt, or it was avoiding the conversation at all, and you sort of run from it. And so I do the same thing. Well, I naturally do the same thing. So I've had to really work on this, but mostly the tone, mostly the words that I use. It's like, oh no, we need to talk about it. And I put so much emphasis on, like, I don't want the avoidance side to come out in our relationship. So I really push for, well, we've got to talk about it. But then I would get into the trap of not being aware of how I'm talking about it, and that would cause a whole other issue and then damage and so forth. I've done that many, many times unintentionally, and it's just like again, it's just where that focus is. My focus was more on the fact that we do talk rather than how we talk, but it's got to go in together. Like, we do need to talk about stuff. Communication is really important, but the way that we communicate is just as important.
Yeah, and I came from a family dynamic that was quite like sarcastic, and when there was conflict, sarcastic, and uses language to imply things, like almost a passive aggressive type thing, and not so passive aggressive. And so the meaning of the way you're saying things really impacts me, because that's like, that just has a whole, and I also just pattern in my head obsesses about things and patterns things. So if I hear you say it, or I see your facial expression or whatever, then it has a whole story behind it, regardless of if that's accurate or not.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a situation where the words meant stuff. And so it's really hard to wade through those things. And sarcasm, which we'll talk about as well on here, is another one of those things. So like these ways of clumsy communication play out in so many different ways for people. So it's not just people that are really blunt. It's not just people that are downright rude. It's also sarcasm. It's passive aggressive comments. All of these things are clumsy ways of communicating things. So it's not just people that are blunt, but No. And I think we all have these things. We all have these defaults that's like, it's a bit awkward to like communicate what is really going on. So then it just comes out in a way we don't really intend to.
So we had someone write in and sharing with us about their experience was like, they would just shut down when conflict would happen. They would kind of stonewall or avoid, or whatever you wanted to call it. And they would just avoid it to a point where they wouldn't avoid it anymore, and it would explode. Yeah. So it's like they the episode that we went through on the 4 horsemen, the different approaches of conflict really stood out to them because it gave them tools and language to understand their situation to then work through that, to avoid that explosion side of things. They didn't fight a lot, but when they fought, it was huge. It was a huge deal.
Yeah. So you can find these things happening, playing out. And then the issue is that you actually miss the need that was being communicated underneath, or the frustration, or the story that was being communicated underneath all of these things. So a lot of us were never taught properly how to ask for help or vulnerability or do conflict in a healthy, constructive way. We also often weren't taught how to express emotion without blaming or defensiveness or deflection. And we also weren't taught often to sit with discomfort without turning it into some kind of sarcasm or some kind of reaction. And so these things play into why we might find it hard to have these conversations in a way that's gentle and constructive straight off the bat. So an example might be, if I say, you never help me with these things, it might actually be more, I'm overwhelmed and I don't know how to say it without being a nag. Or I'm overwhelmed and I don't know how to ask you for help, but then I'm going to explode because I'm overwhelmed and you're not helping me, kind of thing. So there's so much more than just what comes out that's sitting behind it. So this is what usually happens in these cycles. So one partner comes out and says something in a clumsy way, and then the other person reacts defensively to that clumsy way. And then the original point is lost. So the actual thing's not navigated properly. And then both people start feeling misunderstood and frustrated. And so then it just builds to the next person or the same person doing the same thing. They say something clumsy and then the other person gets defensive, and then they points missed. So the actual issue is not navigated and they both feel misunderstood, and then it just builds. So it's a cycle and a loop that needs something to come in and disrupt that loop so that the point can be dealt with, and then they can keep going. So each time that this happens, the emotional gap between partners widens. And it's not because either person is a horrible person. It's because the message is important to navigate. The thing that was trying to be communicated is important to navigate, but the delivery was poor and it's triggering each other. And so you can find yourself years down the track stuck in this place of lack of communication. And it could all be how the conversation has been panning out rather than this actual issue that you're trying to navigate. And we've talked about on here, for me, that one thing that just sits in my head can make everything feel bad. So you can imagine how years of this pattern can make everything feel like it's in crisis, where it might not be in crisis. It might just be that you're struggling to connect. You're so distant now because you can't even communicate properly. And there's a few core things that you need to work out. And that's what's got you gridlocked. And so that's why it's important for us to figure out a way to receive these conversations so that we can keep moving forward. So some of the ways that these clumsy deliveries might look could be like sarcastic jabs, which we mentioned earlier. Oh, look who finally decided to help, instead of I feel like I'm carrying this alone.
Yeah, and just on that too, it's really funny. I don't know where it's come from, but I find myself in that space a lot too. Again, this is something that I've really had to work on. You're very intentional with words and tone and all that sort of stuff, way more than I have. I remember when we were like first married or early in our relationship, I would always get you to come in. This is before ChatGPT. I would always get you to come in. Yeah, you were my ChatGPT in regards to wording and tone of emails and text messages and stuff, because I just could not get it. Like I knew I struggled with it, but I just could not see how the specific words, especially in written words, could come across in a way. But in this area here, I would, like some of these things, I'll just make jokes for the sake of it, even if I didn't actually mean it, but you couldn't tell the difference between when I did mean it and when I didn't mean it. So I will just be sarcastic in general, just to write a bunch of different stuff, and you still sometimes struggle with it. And I've really tried to work on it though, but it just comes out. Like I'll just make sarcastic comments and you're like, you would say every joke has some truth to it. I'm like, actually, this one is zero truth. I'm just being a tool bag. Like I'm not saying anything here at all, but I would also make those sarcastic jabs in a serious way to try and address the situation in a lighthearted way. So you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between when I was trying to communicate something and when I was just being an idiot, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really hard to navigate through. And then it's like, because that's been a big part that I've had to, and I'm still really working on, is how do I say it lightly? How do I bring it across in a nice way? How do I, because I've tried sarcastic and make a fun out of it, but it just doesn't communicate.
Yeah.
I've tried to be clear, but it comes across blunt. And then it's trying to find that middle ground is really, really hard to do when you don't naturally do that. Like I've got to learn this, and I still am continually learning this.
Yeah.
Even with our kids, right? I'm really continually trying to learn how to uplift them, but challenge them, but in a positive way that they don't get put down. It's such a difficult space.
Maybe we need to do an episode on that too, on the flip side of this, instead of receiving.
Yeah, oh,
this
absolutely.
kind of communication,
Yeah.
like how to develop that communication. Yeah, I find myself falling into the sarcastic jabs too. And I think because of my history, it means so much more, like as in like the weight of them was more. But we've had times where we've kind of had to be like, all right, we are getting way too like jokey, sarcastic with each other that I don't even know where the serious sentimentalness, like, or serious relationship part of it is. And we've had to kind of intentionally pause in that space because it's just too much. So yeah, it's easy. It's complex. It's complex because it can hide truths or it can just be joking, but then it does become really hard to navigate through. And another way similar to this is half jokes, full truth. So it must be nice to relax while I do everything. So it's a truth. You're trying to say it, but you're saying it in a jokey way. And this is something I struggle with a lot because there'll be things that I think I'm communicating with you. And then I'll end up being frustrated or I'll like come out and say, I've said this to you. And you're like, I thought you were joking, because I say it in a jokey way. And I'm the same. It's because I don't want to be like, I don't want you doing this. I don't want it to be super heavy all of a sudden, but I also just, I don't know, I need to say it. So it just comes out in like a half joke, but also a truth thing. And that just, again, muddies the water. It becomes weird and it's passive aggressive. And it also tells my brain, oh, I've communicated this with him, when from his perspective, he hasn't heard it. I have
no idea. Yeah.
Passive aggressive comments, a really common one. So an example is, I'll just add it to my list of things no one notices, but that could really just mean I want appreciation, but I'm too scared to ask for it. Or I'm feeling like no one sees what I do. That kind of meaning, but in the way you say it, it puts it in a different tone. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why the jokey stuff is confusing, because passive aggressivity comes across almost jokey or like almost a little bit like, is it true? Is it not true? And so then when you're also joking a lot, it's like, I think people just think, are you being passive aggressive or are you joking? And they all kind of blend into one. There's all different ways of being passive aggressive. Sudden shutdowns like stonewalling or like cutting it off and that kind of thing, like forget it, I'll do it myself. It can mean I'm trying to express that I tried to get you to do it and then I'm giving up on letting you do it. So just forget it, I'll do it myself, or no, I don't want to talk about it, or walk away. That kind of shutdown sort of reaction can also be another clumsy way of communicating what's going on for you inside. And then light insults as humor. And this is another one. They're all very similar, but this is another one that we fall into because we do joke around a lot with each other. I don't know if it's especially Australians, but Aussies break each other down as like a form of affection culturally. That's just kind of how we joke.
It's quite strange. It's quite strange.
And so it's hard to tell. Sometimes it's like, interesting. Yes, cool. Like I get that that's a joke, but also it feels a little close to home. But the flip side of that is we also receive these things. So there's what they're saying or what they might be struggling with when they're communicating. There's also our filter that we take stuff in that makes the conversation clumsy. And so with the like light insults as humor, if you're insecure about something, or you're insecure about how you like your stance in the relationship or whatever, and someone's lightly insulting you as a joke, but it's just purely a joke, you might read that totally differently to how they intend it because it's actually triggering one of your wounds, your past wounds. So there's a few reasons why someone might be using these clumsy tactics when they're communicating. And we've already spoken about some of them, but most of us just weren't shown, a lot of us just weren't shown how to communicate emotionally in a constructive and healthy and calm way. So we might come from families where emotions weren't safe, or we might believe that asking for help or asking for validation or asking for whatever is weakness. It's not just vulnerability. We might feel that there's no graceful way to say what we need to say, like we just can't figure out the words, and so it just comes right out. Or we might use humor or silence as a protection method, which I think is definitely one of mine. And we're also in a world at the moment, I think this is important to say, where the world is very ungracious. So we're in a time where, you know, we talk about cancel culture all the time on here. It's just very ungracious. And if you make one mistake, you're kind of cut off sort of thing. I think that's another reason that I wanted to talk about this on the podcast, because you can hear other voices out in the world that will be like, if someone's done you wrong, get them out. Like I see comment sections all the time on different posts and different podcasts and platforms and that sort of thing, where they're just like, how dare he? How dare he? Actually, an example is I saw a video yesterday of this girl had the Ring camera from their doorbell or whatever, had been filming while her dad received a phone call. He was outside, and the girl herself, had been attacked by their dogs. And so it was her sister calling the dad to say she's being attacked, and the dad freaks out. He sticks his head in the house and he yells to his son to come with him. But all he says is like, come with me. And then he like gets in his car and then drives off. He leaves without the son because the teenage son comes out. He's like, no, dad, stop, dad. And he doesn't like go to the car, and he's just like, stop, you got to talk to me. Stop. And he doesn't walk up to the car. Anyway, this is a random example, but in the comment section, this teenage kid has been torn apart because everyone's like, back in the day, we would just like listen to your dad, or you can't, like, this generation's like ridiculous. They're not listening to their dads. And I was thinking, this poor kid, for one thing, he's a teenager. And two, he was in a state of shock because his dad's just screaming in the door that he needs to get in the car. And he's not giving any explanation at all. So this kid's brain is not processing properly. Yeah. This is not like a calm moment where he's been asked to do something. He's not processing properly. And so all these random strangers are observing this situation, and they're just like, nah, he's done. And now every post this girl's posted, they're talking about her brother and how he's stupid, basically. And I felt really bad because it's a momentary moment that is so understandable. Yeah. Because his brain's in shock and he's a teenager. And yeah, maybe he didn't make the right choice, or he didn't react in the way you'd want someone to in an emergency, but still, it's one instance. Yeah. And he's like canceled. Like, this poor teenager is actually millions of people commenting about this.
And it's crazy because we see this a lot in relationships too. Like, you'll see a post or something up about, or a question on Reddit especially, which is a crazy world, about how, someone might be struggling with someone that might be doing one of these things that we've mentioned today. And the responses are very much like, you don't deserve that, you deserve better, all this sort of stuff. But where's the actual conversation of like, well, how can we actually grow in this together? Yeah. And that's what we want to do. That's what we want to encourage you with. We get this I feel like in today's day and age, and, I feel like an old man saying that, and I probably don't have the wisdom to actually clearly state that, or accurately state this, but I feel like there's such a victim mentality out there of like, well, this has been done to me. I'm the one that's suffering here, or nothing goes right, or whatever else. We really want to bring that hope into this conversation, and this confidence and these tools is like, there's actually something you can do. You are in control of your situation, or elements of your situation. There is something you can do in all of those situations. So come at it with that positive attitude in regards to, all right, we're not stuck here. This is something that's just a product of something. I don't know what, but it's such an easy trap for us to fall into that victim mentality, that cancel culture and all that stuff. And we want to bring confidence into this space.
We just want a different perspective and a different approach, because it's just like an echo chamber of the same things out there. And I think if you're looking for outrage and you're looking for like people to just tell you, oh yeah, you should be mad, that's fine. Like, that's a different thing. If you're looking for help in how to become a stronger couple, and how to understand your partner better and how to communicate better, then there's a different approach to have it. And that's kind of our heart behind this. It helps build resiliency, and it helps actually strengthen. If you're not able to withstand these kinds of things and you're not able to navigate through them, then you're not going to be there's no way to be a strong couple. Like, there's no way for your relationship to be strong if you can't navigate these things. So that's why we want to bring these perspectives to you. So it's a tough place. It's a tough place to say something wrong or make mistakes. It's not a world that's very gracious to stumbling through things and growing without immediate kind of judgment put on how you stumble through it. And so we want to encourage that within your relationships, to allow space for you guys to grow, because you are two flawed humans with your own things that you're bringing into the relationship, and you can grow really closely together. You can become closer, but it takes this process. So again, just to reiterate though, this is not to excuse the behavior of someone who refuses to learn or refuses to be kind, or in a pattern of this disrespect and hurt. That's not to excuse that, and abuse even more on top of that, because that's a different issue, and that's something that needs help from professional help, not from people that are trying to navigate conversations. This is for people that you're both trying and you just don't know how to go forward. And just because someone might not have been taught how to communicate well doesn't mean that they don't have to then learn how to communicate well. And that's what we've expressed when you've been sharing too. Like, it's not your strong point to communicate gently, but you're learning how to communicate gently, and you're putting effort into that, and you're also aware of it. So you put things in place to make sure that, like you said, the people around you are aware that you're aware.
I found that's a big thing too. Like even with the kids, right? Like I'll have a moment of struggling to communicate or out of frustration, whatever, and and not excusing it. And again, we're never excusing bad behavior, but I'm continuing that journey. So like I'll share with them, look, this is something I'm working on. I'm really struggling with it, but I am working on it. I might have a moment of frustration and react in a way that I don't want to. I then go back to them and say, like, look, I'm so sorry. That is not okay. I'm going to keep working on this. You've seen that I'm doing X, Y, Z to work on this. I promise you, I'm still going to work on this, and I'm committing to that. That's been a big help for my kids. But I think a big thing that's helped you and others as well is that clear communication. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm aware of what I'm doing. I get it. I need this so I can do this. So taking you on that journey is much better than just doing it and expecting you to know where I'm at.
Or doing it and then doubling down because you're embarrassed and or whatever is going on for you and not even addressing it at all. Yeah. So there's also, like we said before, reasons why you might be hearing these things, taking them in, filtering them in, and reacting the way that you're reacting as the recipient of them too. There's things that play into that make that a complicated, clumsy conversation too. So things like your old wounds, your experiences from your past, and we've talked about this already. Our experiences from growing up have impacted how we navigate conversations now. So instead of someone saying, if you were to say to me, you forgot to do this, it might translate to me, you're telling me I don't care about that, but that's not true. Or like I might add a whole meaning to that, even though that's not what you're trying to say at all. Perfectionism is huge for me. So if I am given a piece of feedback that makes me think they think I haven't put effort into it or I haven't like thought about it, it really like irks me because I spend so much time trying to make things work well. And so it's not that like that feedback's not important and valid. And when I started doing graphic design and social media, I really had to swallow this because I'd have people come back and like correct it. That's what they do in design all the time. And I just had to be like, yep, it's not about me. It's not about the effort I put in. It's not about my like lack of trying to perfect it. It's just that it's not the vision that they had for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And trying to get my hand around that. Family dynamics, huge part. So raised voices might automatically mean danger to you or might automatically mean signal the end of a relationship or something like that. Or sarcasm for me, that had a different meaning than it does for you. And so your family dynamics growing up can impact how you're filtering what's coming in when you're an adult and when you're in your own relationship. And another thing is low bandwidth. So even small comments just feel like too much. So you've got low bandwidth in terms of being able to manage. You're just probably in like a burnout state. You're in an overwhelmed state and you just have very little bandwidth in terms of managing feedback that might feel a bit confronting. So these filters are things that happen to us. And there's probably a number of other things that are going on for people as well. But there are reasons why we might be reacting this way. And a lot of them aren't our fault necessarily, but they are our responsibility in terms of recognizing them and working through them. And if you don't notice them, you'll just react. If you're not spending time to be intentional, you will just react out of them without recognizing what's going on. And that just perpetuates the loop that we've talked about, because your reaction will then show a story to the person that you're talking to. And that'll then trigger whatever filters they've got going on. And until you can break it down into why these things affect the way that they affect you, then you're going to just keep functioning out of that without any kind of clarity. But the issue with this stuff is that it's not just conversations either. It's actually your nervous system reacting as well. And this is the stuff that I love with coaching, because we talk about this stuff a lot. But conflict isn't just what you're saying. It's all these things we've already discussed. It's what sits behind it for you, what need you're trying to express, what your experiences were. And it's about how your nervous system hears it and then reacts. What you're taking in affects how your brain actually processes. Because if your brain senses threat for whatever numerous filters it might have, if it's sensing threat, even emotional threat, then it shifts into protection mode or a flight or fight, and it turns off our logic center. So it means that we actually cannot bring the best of us to the table because we're in this protection mode. We can't think logically. Our memory glitches out. You probably find that's when you can't think of the right words. Like if you're in a conversation, I'm sure everyone's experienced this when you're like, I should have said this. And then afterwards you reflect back and you're like, I should have said this, this, and this. Or I should have clarified this. Or you're trying to think of an example and you're like, I can't think of a single example right now, but I know it happens.
Yeah.
And also your tone radar will spike. So you'll be really aware of their tone, but you also probably won't be super aware of your own tone. So it can just make it very hard to manage and maintain your conversation in a way that's going to be constructive. So that happens when you're flooded. And just think about what happens when both of you are flooded. Your brains are flooded with this fight or flight kind of reaction. If both of you are coming to the table out of that, things are not going to be smooth. That's not the kind of conversation that's going to look great on paper. If you reflect back on it later, it's going to be clunky and it's going to be clumsy. And so that's why tone often lands before the meaning. So if you've filtered it by how they're saying it or the specific words they're saying rather than what they're trying to communicate, and you're reacting out of this and you're feeling a threat, you shut down your logic brain and you can't actually communicate properly or process properly what they're saying. So the conversation is judged right off of tone or judged right off the specific words they're using rather than what are they trying to express to me. So that's not a broken process. That's a normal, natural process. That's what happens in our bodies. And recognizing that is really helpful. And it also, I think, it's not just helpful for yourself and how you're navigating things. I think it's really helpful for having grace for your partner navigating things. Because if I can recognize that they're stressed and overwhelmed and that they're not going to be processing things logically or acting logical, then that will, for one thing, help calm me down, but also help me have grace for what's coming out of their mouth and the way it's coming out of their mouth. So we've talked about all of these things, why it's important, how it might be happening, what might be happening for you. Let's talk about some of the ways that you can actually help weed through this in a constructive way and decode what's going on so that you can understand what they're trying to communicate rather than what they are saying, and disarm the protection mode that we are falling into. So in the moment is important because, as we've spoken about with examples often, there have been times where we just find ourselves in a conversation loop and we need to stop. We need a break so that we can come back and come at it from a different perspective. And so there needs to be in the moment breakers for you. If you recognize something's going on, these are things that you can implement straight away. But these are some things you can actually say. You can be like, sorry, pause. I am feeling like I'm about to react instead of respond properly. So can we take a pause? Or can we do a soft reset? Can we start this again gently? Or I know I'm taking this personally. I just need a second to breathe. Or I really want to hear you, but can we just take some breaths first? So those are things you can actually communicate those out loud to your partner. Physical things that you can do for yourself that are really helpful is take one full body breath. So really deep breath in and out. Inhale through your nose and exhale with a sigh. That helps just regulate your body, helps calm your nervous system. Another is to say, I just need to step into a room for 30 seconds. Then you just step out of the room, be by yourself for 30 seconds, and then come back in. You can put one hand on your chest and breathe and feeling your breath.
It helps you sort of center down again. So when we get overwhelmed or frustrated, we don't really aware of things around us, right? So putting your hand on your chest, it just helps you be aware of your movement, sort of that mindfulness stuff. Yeah. And it gets you back centered into that moment. So it just, rather than your mind going everywhere, you're just sort of focusing in on something.
Yeah. Yeah. It centers you. It grounds you a little bit in that moment. And then you can also sit down if you're standing or stand up if you're slumping. So that signals to your nervous system that you're safe. So just change how you're positioned, because we can get real tense and stand really intensely. So those things hopefully in the moment can help circuit break what's going on for you, help break that reactiveness to what's been presented to you. But then there's some things to help you navigate it either once you've calmed down or later down the track, because a lot of the time you do just need a little break before you can have the conversation constructively. So one thing that's really important is when you're having this conversation with your partner and they've said something in a really clumsy and hurtful way, again, easy to react. But if we go at it with the desire to figure out what their need is rather than what they're saying, it can be really helpful. So you're trying to figure out what was the need that they're expressing there? What's sitting under this for them? So what need might they be trying to express, albeit badly? Another thing is to do a trigger test. So what did they say versus what did I hear? And that can be, you can even do that together. Be like, I heard this. What did you say? Because sometimes the word someone says triggers something and you actually end up hearing something completely different. And I've had this happen for myself multiple times. I've also had this come up in coaching where, people will repeat this thing and they'll be like, they said that I'm too much. They said that I'm too much. And then when we explore that more, the reality is no one said you're too much. The story you took in was you're too much for whatever reasons. There's lots of reasons. And they probably did a lot of things to imply that to you. But the words you're too much didn't come out of their mouths. Some people can actually remember words that were not said.
Yeah.
So if you can do this and be like, what did they say? What were the words that came out of their mouth? And what did I hear? Can be really helpful for weeding through some of that. And even together, if you're in the place where you can have that conversation. Reversing it as well. So if I said this, what would I be meaning? And just trying to put yourself in their space of being like, if I was the one communicating this, what would the meaning be that's sitting behind it? It tends to give you a little bit more grace when you can do that. Looking one level deeper as well, I think is really important too. So it's not just about the dishes. It might be about something else. So instead of being like, they're so mad about the dishes, being like, is this really about the dishes or is there something else going on? And just pressing one level deeper into this. Your partner might be getting frustrated about this thing. Unlikely that they're going to get that frustrated about something like the dishes or something surface level without it meaning something else is sitting behind it.
And again, tone is really important in that too. Yeah. You don't be like, you're cranky. What else is going on? Yeah.
Or are you on your period?
Yeah. I hate it when Amy says that to me. Yeah.
Well, he's on his period all the time.
I'm not.
Talking about whether like we do this joking thing and trying to figure out if it was a joke. So you can actually, and we do this sometimes, mostly me. I'll be like, was that a joke? Because it kind of sounded a little bit real.
Yeah.
And then the issue is that even when you say it's a joke, sometimes I'm like, it's not. So you also then have to trust their words. One thing that I've been trying to implement, and I've actually found it really helpful, is if we play this out and you've said a joke that's like, okay. And then I say to you, was that a joke or were you trying to actually be serious? And you're like, no, I'm joking. You've said I'm joking, and I might read tone or I might see facial expressions or I might know from previous conversations, actually, I don't think he's fully joking. I think he's not trying to like have a conversation about it right now. And so I could, again, because my brain patterns and I obsess over things, I could like be like, no, he mustn't be. Like it's actually this thing. But what I've been trying to do across the board is you've told me you're joking. So I'm going to release this right now. I'm not going to hold it like it's my thing to figure out what you're trying to say and then react from it. I need to practice taking your word for it and your ownership of it. And so if that's something you've got a problem with, you can come back to me and talk to me about it.
Yeah. If it's my problem, it's my problem.
Yeah.
And if I haven't communicated that problem, it's still my problem.
Yeah. 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 And so, because I have a tendency to just really sit on these things, and then I can find like little stupid things like a joke could really like throw me for a little while. So I'm trying to practice this. Like you've released me from this in your words. And I think a lot of people do that when they don't really want to release the person, but I'm going to take your word for it because that's what we've expressed and you're an adult and you can work on that yourself. And so then I can just ease up on the holding of that responsibility or the trying to figure it out. There's a lot of little safe starters that you can go with as well that can help you when you come back, or even in the conversation, but when you come back as well. So you could say that came out a bit sharp. Can you try it a different way? Or I think what you're saying really matters. Can you say it differently? Or I'm listening, even if that was a little bit blunt. So just like recognizing to them what you're saying that's like stinging, but I'm really trying to hear behind that.
Well, it also communicates how you're receiving it too. So again, like, I mentioned before about how I need to process this, Amy, I'm just processing, just let me get through this. So, and blah, blah, blah. But then she also needs to be able to communicate to where you're at in the receiving stuff. So you could be like, again, you saying to me that's a bit blunt. It's like, all right, cool. Now I can, it helps me help you, help me help you, help me help you.
Help me help you.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think it would calm you down.
Yeah.
Hearing me recognize that, unless I said it like, that was a bit blunt.
Yeah. If you say blunt back. Yeah, it's like, well, okay.
Exactly. And it helps position me mentally to be listening. Even if I'm not feeling it, if I have that as like a practiced thing to come out and I can say, that was a bit sharp. Can you say it again? Or I'm really listening, even though that stung. Then I think it can help me. It's like also a phrase when you're like, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like it kind of does that a little bit, gets you there before you really are there. Pattern interrupts as well, like the pausing, taking a moment, stepping out of the room, restarting the conversation, or just recognizing I'm feeling myself getting defensive. Anything that can interrupt the pattern that you've found yourself in over and over again. And if these are not how you've navigated it, it might feel really uncomfortable to just all of a sudden be super serious in the face, or super super constructive in the face of something that you find yourselves in often. But I think there are gentle ways to introduce this that will help you And it may take your partner a little bit of time because the person that is in it and isn't like learning these new tools might be a little bit thrown by that at first. And so you may find that their reaction's not, oh, that's a great idea. Like they might be like, what are you talking about? Or like whatever, and struggle with their own processing. But you taking that moment to implement some of these things for your own constructiveness and for the idea that this conversation will be worked on as a relationship and going forward can be helpful regardless of where your partner is at with it. And then also coming back to it later and just rebuilding and repairing. So instead of you've had this conversation, it was awkward and you just push it away and you don't deal with it again, which I think is such a common thing. And it's something we really try not to do. Like we really try to always come back and rebuild after we've had a tricky conversation, even when it's been really clumsy. And
even if it's a day later, you know, we have that break, and that's the importance of ownership over our part to play. And it's like, all right, well, if I feel like we haven't resolved that, I need to go away. Either we got too heated in the conversation or whatever. I need to go away. I now need to process this. I can't just shut down and put it out of my head, which I can do. I can tend to do. I can do that pretty easily. But I've had to really work on that. I was like, no. Where did I see it going wrong? It's usually that we end up in some random cycle and we just go all over the place and we move away from the topic that we're actually trying to talk about. So then I come back to the topic that we're trying to talk about. I unpack that for myself, and then we revisit that conversation when we both have now reflected more. It's like, and that becomes so much more constructive.
Yeah, that's almost always where we'll actually see good movement. And the other thing I was just thinking too is like that's the tactic either partner or both partners can try and implement. But if your partner has tried to express something to you in a clumsy way that hurt you, recognizing and not pretending like it didn't hurt you, I think that's really valid. But also, if you come back later and you say, so what was that you were trying to tell me about this thing? And you bring up the thing they were trying to raise, that for one thing, I feel like that heals a lot of stuff, because even though you were hurt and maybe the conversation didn't go very well, it recognizes that you had heard them. Like you recognize them and you're going to take time to try and figure out what was going on, even though that conversation in and of itself wasn't great. And it can, if you're willing to raise it again, especially if it's not you, it's easy to raise your thing. Maybe not easy, but it's easier to raise your thing over and over and be like, I want to talk about this again. I want to talk about this again. But there's something beautiful about flipping it as the partner who's received it, bringing that back up again and saying, let's talk about that now. I think it eases some of that tension, shifts things up a little bit, and it also just shows that you actually care. If your partner's raised something and it's had a bad conversation, it's been pushed away, I can almost guarantee the thing's not gone. It's not like resolved itself, and it's not going to resolve itself when it gets triggered up again later. So just because they're not bringing it up again doesn't mean it's not an issue. If you haven't kind of navigated through that conversation, it can be really worth bringing it back. So like, I overreacted, but I want to hear what you were saying, or can we come back to that? I think it was really important. And then the ownership filter of this, which is just recognizing your reactions, recognizing what is the stuff we talked about earlier, what comes into play when I'm confronted with this stuff, and how might that be impacting how we're having this conversation. And if you can recognize what's happening for you, then it will ease some of the reactions that you're going to have just naturally, and it'll make the conversation easier in the future. So these are some of the ways that we can navigate these clumsy conversations. Again, it is not that when we talk about the ownership, you're responsible for your reaction and you're responsible for your actions. You're not responsible for making sure that your partner can communicate well. But we can help. Like, we can help bring out constructiveness in our relationships, and we do have ownership of our part of our relationships. It's a team effort. And so if you're finding yourself in these patterns, there are things that you can try and implement that probably they probably won't feel natural initially, but they probably haven't come up naturally on their own either. And you can try them and see if they're going to shake up this thing that you guys are stuck in, and see if it gives it a bit of a fresh approach and maybe a fresh understanding. So a couple little final thoughts to think about. Your partner's clumsy little thing that they said, it might not have been from disrespect. It might not have been intentionally trying to hurt you. What if they were just trying to connect or trying to communicate something that was important to them, and they just did it in a way that was clumsy? And if that's the case, then there's more of a conversation to be had. And what if there isn't a bad guy and a good guy, but it's just more these triggers and these fears and these filters playing out that are impacting how we're hearing each other, how we're loving each other, and how we're communicating. So, as always, curiosity, coming at it with curiosity, coming at it in a gentle way, coming at it with communication, intentionality. Yep, all these things really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's Clumsy Conversations.
Right. We clumsied through it.
We did.
Great.
I might pull together one day a blooper reel of this episode.
Oh,
and
the
then
joys.
Then you will see.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Good chat.
See ya.